5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
So good afternoon and welcome to today's session of Business as Usual. I'm Audrey Russo, President and CEO of the Pittsburgh Technology Council, and I am joined here today by my co-host of Tech Vibe Radio and the Vice President of Visibility at the Pittsburgh Tech Council, Jonathan Kirsting. So just a few things about today's call before we get started. It would not have been possible without the strong support of our good friends at Huntington Bank, who stepped up to sponsor this entire series. If you don't know about Huntington, they're actually the largest SBA lender here in southwestern Pennsylvania, and their team is busy providing tremendous support for the community, and the work that they're doing now could not be more critical. So thank you, Huntington. I also want to thank the team at AT&T for their support for our public policy series, and more importantly, for the support they provide to the broader community during this pandemic. Last week, AT&T announced 3 months of free wireless service for frontline nurses and physicians nationwide on the FirstNet network, built with AT&T in public-private partnership with the First Responder Network Authority, as well as an additional $10,000 locally to support 412 food rescue. So hats off to both Huntington and to AT&T. So just a little bit about the technology and our format for today's call. So this is a special edition of Business as Usual in that we'll be hosting an hour-long segment focusing on the state of our nation's telecommunications infrastructure and some of the key initiatives underway to help bridge the digital divide, speed the deployment of telehealth initiatives, and to introduce the next generation wireless technologies through 5G networks. Our first guest, who I'm very thrilled about, will be the FCC Chairman, Ajit Pai, who will be followed by Jay Brown, President and CEO of Crown Castle. We are very thrilled to have them both here. So a couple of things. Most of you will notice that we've muted your microphones. So I would ask that you keep your microphones on mute throughout the entire call. Some of us, like myself, have a lot of background noise going on around us, and we want to make sure that you can hear everyone clearly. So with that said, we want the call to be interactive. So please take note of the chat box at the bottom of your desktop screens. If you have questions for our guests, please type your question in that box along with your name and company. And very importantly, this section is not for advertising your products, it's just for questions. So, okay with that, do we have Chairman Pai with us now?
There
yes,
he is.
Hey,
all right.
Hey, so great to see you. I want to do a couple of things, Ajit. So I want to welcome someone, and someone who is no stranger to the Pittsburgh Technology Council and to Pittsburgh. I cannot believe, Ajit, that it has been 8 years since President Obama appointed you to the FCC. You less than 60 days after your confirmation, you came to Pittsburgh.
Absolutely right.
First policy. So welcome.
Well, it's great to be back with you, Audrey. I wish I could be there in person with you, Brian, and the rest of the great team at the Pittsburgh Technology Council. But it's a testament to technology that we're able to do this virtually. And look forward to coming back to Pittsburgh at some point in the near future, both to visit with you and perhaps get another Primanti sandwich.
Yeah.
You're always welcome back for another sandwich, man, for sure.
Well, I am so grateful that you made yourself available to us. So with that, I want to just jump in to a few things, okay? And so let me set the stage for this. So in the days after 9/11, the nation learned very, very quickly about the vulnerability of our telecom network. And we've spent the past 2 decades, hard to believe, 2 decades, working to improve the resilience of those networks. Can you give us an update on how the wired and wireless infrastructure networks are holding up in the United States? Have we broken the internet, or is it mostly holding up?
It's broken.
Can you share an overview? Give us an overview.
Sure. Well, as this call suggests, the internet is actually doing fairly well, and that's replicated on a macro level. What we have seen is that usage has gone up on the fixed side, wired networks, from 20 to 35%, depending on the part of the country and the time of the day. The place of usage has shifted quite a bit, as you might imagine, with many people working from home. So instead of a lot of urban usage during the day, that's shifted now to suburban and exurban use. On the wireless side, we've also seen an uptick, something like 10 to 20% increase in usage, although that has tended to plateau with some of the bigger providers. And overall, what we've seen is the internet experience for millions of Americans has continued to be quite strong, actually, even with people using relatively high bandwidth applications like Zoom or Netflix and other things at home. Those networks have been able to thrive. And I've conducted a number of calls with some of these providers and trade associations representing them. And they've indicated that part of the reason was that the FCC has made some of the decisions over the last several years to give them a strong incentive to invest in infrastructure. And they've been able to do that with many billions of dollars increased over the past couple of years. And now, because they've been able to architect their networks to anticipate the peak traffic at any given time, now that the usage has spiked, the architecture of the network is able to sustain that. And so I'm really grateful to some of them, for many of them across the country, for doing what they can to make sure that our networks are strong. Ever more important, as you know, to work from home, for kids to do remote learning, for applications like telehealth and the like.
Right. So yesterday afternoon, something happened. You began accepting applications for almost $250 million in telehealth grants. So
Right.
Can you talk about that program and why it's important right now, and who should be paying close attention to that opportunity?
Appreciate the question. This is something I'm really passionate about and have been for some time. I'm the child of rural physicians who practiced for many years in Kansas. And what I found in my hometown and many others like it across the country is that it's increasingly hard to get a specialist or even a primary care doctor to live in some of these smaller towns. And so telehealth might be the only way that some people in these places will get quality medical care unless they're willing to drive for several hours. And that gap in healthcare access has only been accentuated by the pandemic, both in rural and in urban areas now. With patients needing to practice social distancing, it's very important for both healthcare practitioners who don't want to get exposed to potential patients, and for coronavirus patients and non-coronavirus patients to be able to distance themselves. Telehealth is a way of addressing that gap. And so about a month ago, I went to Congress, to Democrats and Republicans on Capitol Hill, and I said, look, we really need to set up a bespoke telehealth program to address the coronavirus pandemic. And I'm really grateful to Congress for about a week and a half ago for passing legislation, and the Friday following for the president for signing legislation, allowing the FCC to set up this program and giving us $200 million in funding. As I said, the president signed the bill on a Friday. The following Monday, our terrific staff at the FCC implemented my proposal to put a plan before the commissioners. The commissioners voted the next day. And now, as of today, we're already accepting applications for this telehealth program. Essentially, any healthcare facility is able to go to our website on fcc.gov, and you can find the COVID-19 telehealth program application. It's very simple, user-friendly. We want to process those applications quickly and get money out the door to fund some of these critical connected care initiatives that are going to be so important for both coronavirus and non-coronavirus patients. Very much encourage people to get more detail on the FCC's website. And this is the cause, if it's successful, I hope will be a good portent of other things to come on telehealth.
And so what kinds of things are you seeing right now that are coming in? Are there any intriguing ideas?
Good question. So just yesterday, we opened up the application process. We've gotten above 400 applications so far.
Wow.
And later, yeah, it's incredible. There's been tremendous amount of interest, and I've gotten over email, over tweets, a bunch of people saying, how can we apply? So this afternoon, actually, I'm slated to sit down virtually, of course, with the team and go over some of the applications. What are some of the trends we're seeing? What are some of the more interesting applications? So I'll be able to have a better answer to that question later on. But I'm really confident that some of these healthcare providers who've been struggling with in-person care will come up with very creative solutions that we can help facilitate.
Mm-hmm. Right. So is there a question, Jonathan, out there that someone wants to jump in real quick?
We are starting to roll in right now, and I love it because this is the best part of the conversation when our audience comes in. And Ajit, once again, thanks again for taking the time. We really look forward to you coming to Pittsburgh again because it's just, you always bring us some great information. So from our guy Stuart Rogers here. He wants to know how is the FCC's program to improve universal service universal service progressing, especially high-cost Lifeline and rural healthcare?
Great questions. So all of the 4 universal service programs are incredibly important, no more so than during the pandemic. And so with respect to the rural healthcare program and Lifeline in particular, we've taken very specific actions to enable some of the providers who are participating in that program to worry about connectivity as opposed to paperwork. So for example, on the Lifeline side, we relaxed some requirements for consumers to have to get recertified because that can be a burden on them and can inadvertently kick them out of the program. Similarly, on the provider side for Lifeline, we relaxed some of the rules to enable them to focus on making sure that their consumers remain served. In terms of the rural healthcare program, similarly, we extended a critical deadline to enable some of the companies to focus on providing some of the healthcare providers with connectivity that they need. And in addition, have done some other regulatory tweaks in order for them to be able to do what they do best. We're also looking, as I said, as a part of the telehealth program, if that's successful, although it's separate from the rural healthcare program, to incorporate whatever lessons we learned there into the rural healthcare program. For example, the COVID-19 telehealth program involves some streamlining and a little bit more, you might say, dexterity in terms of how the FCC processes these things. And so we're looking to see if there's anything we can incorporate into the rural healthcare program going forward. The other 2 programs are also really important, however. The wireless side, the wired side rather, the high cost program, which was mentioned, is incredibly important. We still anticipate going forward this summer with the Rural Digital Opportunity Fund, a $20 billion fund that's going to be able to provide high-speed connectivity, fixed connectivity, to millions of homes and businesses across the United States. And similarly, on the wireless side, I just proposed, and the FCC will be voting on April 23rd, on my proposal for a $9 billion 5G fund, which will make sure that every American is able to get 5G connectivity. We recognize that there are many parts of the country where there might not be a business case for a private company on its own to provide 5G. We don't want anyone to be left behind as this digital revolution sweeps the country. And so we're going to target those parts of the country with this important universal service program.
Very cool stuff. We have another question we are bringing live. We have Wendy Party here. She's from the Children's Institute of Pittsburgh. Wendy, you got a great question for Ajit here. Are we getting you there?
Wendy?
I'll read the question, just in case.
Question.
I'll take it out here. So she's the CEO of the Children's Institute of Pittsburgh.
Oh, terrific.
Where we provide outpatient behavioral health services to children and adolescents. We are not an FQHC, CMHC, or RHC. We are a licensed behavioral health outpatient provider. Are we eligible to apply for these funds?
So I'd have to take a look at the particular status that you've got. We try to include a very broad variety of facilities. If you don't mind, shoot me an email at Ajit, it's ajit.pai@fcc.gov. That's ajit.pai@fcc.gov. We'll see if we can accommodate you. I would anticipate for a nonprofit facility providing healthcare, that seems to fall squarely within the definition, but I just want to be sure before rendering advice.
That's nice
Shoot
to
me an email and we'll do in the program if we can.
Absolutely. And we have your email in the chat here so she can contact you. So that's
Yeah, please do. That'd be great.
One more question, Jonathan? Is there one more question?
Oh my goodness, they just keep coming. I love this. Like I said, this is like Christmas here over here. And we get all these great questions here. So we have something from, let me make sure I got the right question here going here as the chat keeps growing. This is kind of a long one, so hang tight with me here. So this is from Tracy Lawless. And she says, my client is the online curriculum you start over again. My client is the online curriculum space is waiting to see how the education stabilization funds will be distributed in PA. We are told FCC E-rate, E-R-A-T-E regs have been relaxed so rural areas can have better access to online learning. Is this the case? And are there any recommendations for states to invest in online learning as opposed to filling budget gaps?
Good question. So one of the things I proposed along with that telehealth program I mentioned, this is a month ago, was for Congress to give the FCC authority to set up what I've called a remote learning initiative. And part of the problem we face is that under current law, the FCC's E-rate program only allows us to fund services provided directed to classrooms. And it uses those 2 specific words, services and classrooms. And one of the things I've said to Congress is, look, in this environment in particular, I think it's pretty clear that millions of school kids, including my own, are no longer in a classroom. And so what they need is connectivity like Wi-Fi hotspots and the like, but hotspots aren't services. And again, the home is not a classroom. So we encourage them to give us authority to set up a remote learning initiative outside of the context of E-rate to allow us to be just as flexible for school kids and teachers as we have been with healthcare practitioners and patients. We still are looking forward to working with Congress to give us that authority, because we need to address that gap in connectivity for educators and the school kids across the country very quickly. In the meantime, one of the things we're studying is, in the context of the CARES Act, which was passed, the Coronavirus Relief Act, a couple of weeks ago, is the funding that was allocated to the Department of Education. One part of that funding is going to be distributed to states and local school districts across the country, with the purpose, where one of the purposes of that funding is to aid connectivity to technology, education technology. And so we want to work with them to make sure that educators are able to put in the hands of their students the tools they need in order to do digital learning. It's incredibly important. As I said, even before the pandemic, it's absolutely essential right now for us to be on the same page on that.
That's exciting. So, you know, this crisis right now, this pandemic, is actually happening right on the brink and during the midst of a major transition in technology for our wireless network services. Talk about 5G and the benefits that you see in the marketplace. And it's relevant.
It is. It's incredibly important. It's important from a strategic perspective. The United States aims to lead the world in 5G technology development and deployment. There are other countries, especially China, that want to seize the mantle of leadership for themselves. But we want that to happen on our shores, not for parochial reasons, but mainly because the investment and innovation and open economy that come with wireless innovation brings with it a lot of economic benefits. On a micro perspective, so to speak, we want to make sure we pursue aggressively 5G for the benefit of American consumers. Speeds for 5G, for instance, will be 100 times faster than 4G, perhaps even more than that. The latency, which is the relative responsiveness of these networks, is going to be incredibly low. So you could be able to do real-time things like gaming and artificial reality and augmented and virtual reality and the like. In addition to that, it's going to transform entire industries. We talked a little bit about telehealth and telemedicine. That's a key application, but there are others too, like autonomous vehicles and even agriculture and the like. So what we're doing is executing the 5G FAST plan, a plan for facilitating America's superiority in 5G technologies, getting more spectrum into the commercial marketplace, making it easier to deploy the wireless infrastructure of the future, promoting more fiber deployment, because fiber is going to be incredibly important to carry all of these connected devices traffic back into the core of the networks. And I'm really excited about what it means. We're already starting to see a hint of it on the industrial side, at least. And so even on the consumer side, T-Mobile, for instance, has lit up a 5G network covering some 200 million Americans. And that's already doubled speeds over the last 30 days because of some of the dispensations we've been able to make. So in a nutshell, 5G means better, faster service for Americans across a whole variety of different areas.
And now on the brink of this, pandemic, the pressures on the system are even higher. But the actual utilization has been, transformative for those people who have access. But for those people who don't have access, this is even more important. Do you agree?
I couldn't agree more. It's going to be a critical tool for closing that digital divide. Both 5G and next generation Wi-Fi, which is an unlicensed as opposed to a licensed cellular technology. We're very bullish on what these wireless technologies could mean for American consumers, especially if you live in a part of the country, whether rural or urban, where it's difficult to build a business case for laying a fiber line, for instance. Right. Wireless technology can really be a game changer. And in particular, if folks are interested in Wi-Fi, especially if you have multiple people in the house, kids on a couple of devices, you and your spouse on a couple of devices, you're going to notice that Wi-Fi may be slowing down. Well, that's something we are addressing just in a few weeks. I've rolled out a bold new plan for Wi-Fi in the 6 gigahertz band. This would be the biggest expansion of Wi-Fi in a generation, essentially a quintupling of the amount of spectrum that's available for Wi-Fi, and it will provide super high speed and good coverage, especially in some of these hard to serve areas. So we're very committed to wireless as a tool for closing the digital divide, and I think we stand on the brink of some great innovations.
Mm-hmm. I do too. Jonathan, any more questions? I see.
We have a question here from Andy Wu, and it's around the 5G stuff, so this is perfect timing for it. And he wants to know, how do the current events change the relative position of the U.S. relative to global competition in 5G technology? both in terms of our own installed base of 5G infrastructure and devices, as well as U.S. firms supplying 5G hardware and software globally.
Yeah, this is a question I've been spending a lot of time about, especially before the pandemic hit. And there are two different aspects to the question. One, I would put in the category of building blocks. The FCC has done a really good job, I would think, of putting some of the building blocks in place for 5G innovation. We've made available already more spectrum in the past couple of years than was held by all mobile broadband providers in the United States combined for 5G. We finished an auction of the 28 and 24 gigahertz bands, an auction of the 37, 39, 47 gigahertz bands, starting an auction of the 3.5 gigahertz band later this summer, and an auction of the C band, the 3.7 band at the end of the year. We've also got outstanding proceedings on the 2.5 gigahertz band, the 4.9 gigahertz band, and a few others. That's just on the license side. On the Wi-Fi side, I mentioned the 6 gigahertz spectrum. We've also proposed opening up the 5.9 gigahertz band as well. And we have a few other initiatives in the pipeline. Infrastructure, we've really modernized the rules and enabled hundreds of thousands more small cells than we had in 2017 to be installed. So in terms of the building blocks, from a policy perspective, we're in a good shape. One of the difficulties that Andy identified, however, is the supply chain. The supply chain is relatively consolidated. There's no American player in that supply chain for the full stack network solutions, network equipment solutions, essentially Huawei, Ericsson, and Nokia, with Samsung and ZTE playing smaller roles. That's been a challenge for us, obviously, not just from a policy perspective, but of course from a global geopolitical perspective. So we've tried to address that through two ways. Number one, ensuring supply chain integrity. Here in the United States, for example, no telecommunications provider who gets funding from the FCC is allowed to use that on problematic equipment, initially designated based on consultation with the intelligence community and the national security agencies as Huawei and ZTE. Additionally, or at least I was going abroad to talk to some of our allies from Bahrain to Germany to Malaysia to share our views on security and to encourage them to think about a risk-based framework for evaluating network equipment. But more generally, we realize that this is a very difficult market to address based on the current status quo. So we're looking forward to virtualized radio access networks. Unfortunately, because of the pandemic, we had to cancel a March 26th forum the FCC was going to hold on virtualized RAN, because we think that virtualizing, essentially moving from a hardware-based to a software-based 5G network management solution, is ultimately where we're going to go. And there's some great American companies, some of them you've heard, like Cisco and Intel, others that you might have not, like Altio Star, Mavenir, Parallel Wireless, and others, who are doing great things here to essentially bypass some of the chokehold that Huawei has in certain markets by creating a software-based solution. And software, of course, is something the US has traditionally done very well in. So exciting things still to come. Hopefully, once we open up, we'll be able to reschedule that forum, and you'll be able to see for yourself some of the great virtualized and open architecture that's out there for America's 5G entrepreneurs.
And a lot of opportunity for some further disruption, actually, in that market as a result of the supply chain logjam. That's what I
absolutely right. I mean, for those of you who are fans of Clayton Christensen and the Innovator's Dilemma, I think some of these vRAN companies are really pursuing the issue that Mr. Christensen pursued so many years ago, which is finding a marketplace that is not innovating as quickly necessarily in terms of the full stack network equipment solution that has traditionally been offered, and working around it with a very innovative, cost-effective solution that at the same time is even more secure than before. So I'm very excited to see what that means for America's wireless economy.
Well, first of all, I think that we had a whole generation of people that migrated to big cities, particularly in the United States, right? And so with this pandemic and with an opportunity for 5G, maybe there'll be some more dispersion of people who can live anywhere and not necessarily be concentrated in high density cities. And so that's what we're counting on in Pittsburgh, because we know the innovation that emanates from here. And we know that moving into the future, we're right to be a place of huge prosperity for all. And I think that your work demonstrates that. So we need you back here, Mr. Chairman. We need you back here.
You know, I have a request. I have a request, Ajit. So check this out. So we're launching our 5G for PGH 5G initiative with Crown Castle and DQE and AT&T. And sometime in the very near future, we're holding a business plan competition for our entrepreneurs to dream up what kind of a business can succeed with a 5G network. And we want you to be one of our top judges.
Hey, get out.
I'm just saying, man. You can either fly in when we're able to do that again, or we can have you Zoom in.
Yeah, we'll have you Zoom in.
Either way. We think it's pretty exciting.
That'd be great. I'll check with the lawyers, make sure it's kosher. But I'd love to be there. That would be fantastic.
Absolutely.
That would be great. So,
We would love to have you.
we can count on that. And Jonathan, is there one more question? Because I
There-
want to be sensitive to the chairman's time.
Absolutely, absolutely. Before it leaves my screen, so this is from Chris Radeye, and he's thanking you for joining us today. And he says he's responsible for technology for a telehealth provider that utilizes the public internet to transmit critical diagnostic images that are often large in size and require ample bandwidth end to end. We often find ourselves stuck routing between providers where unbalanced peering occurs, thus impacting transmission and patient care. With margins being as low as they are in healthcare, organizations like ours cannot afford private connectivity to our hospital clients. What can be done to make the internet open, fair, and available to provide critical healthcare for patients in rural communities?
That's a really good question. Number one,
too. I got through it.
No, so with the caveat that he's obviously much more expert in this area than I am, well, I would say that number one, we need to ensure that infrastructure investment is prioritized, that we build as strong and as redundant an internet infrastructure as possible to ensure that if there is congestion at one part of the network, there are other ways to get there. If you don't have a direct peering arrangement, for example, that transit is available at relatively low cost. And transit rates have, as I'm sure the questioner knows, have decreased substantially in recent years. The other thing is to ensure that for critical content, for critical traffic, such as telehealth generated traffic, that you're able to make sure that you have prioritized arrangements. And this is one of the issues that has come up recently in many years. We want to make sure that for mission critical services like telehealth, like transportation and the like, that we are able to optimize the network to serve those types of applications. And I think that's something that many Americans have come to recognize, is that if you have something that's important to your health, you want that to take precedence over the streaming of a cat video. No offense to cat video lovers out there. We want to make sure that those important files are able to be transferred with dispatch. And so I definitely recognize that the peering and transit arrangements are something that a lot of the folks like him are struggling with. But our solution, from our perspective at least, is to make sure that, again, the internet infrastructure is strong and that we are able to direct traffic, that important traffic, in a way that is optimized.
So, Ajit, is it okay if we have a list of questions that we send to you that we didn't get a chance to review? We'll send to you and see if we can answer them and post them on our website. I hope that's
sure.
Okay. You've given out your email. You've given out information about the funds that you're actually dispersing. Is there anything else that you want to share with us before we let you go?
Well, sure. One thing, I'd be remiss if I didn't thank the people out there who are in the field, literally out of their houses, working every day to make sure that these networks stay up and running. I think as millions of us are staying at home, working from home, a lot of us are relying on connectivity more than ever before. And it's those folks in the field who are making sure that they're able to provide that connectivity who deserve our thanks. And more generally, I want to salute not just the healthcare workers across the board who are just doing heroic work, but also the unsung folks, the grocery store workers, the postal workers, the construction workers, the other folks who are going out of their homes every day to enable us to conduct our daily lives. And I think when all of this is said and done, I'm glad to say that millions of Americans will have found it to be our finest hour, that we all came together in search of a greater purpose than ourselves. And once this difficulty is over, I hope that these folks get the recognition they deserve.
Well, you are doing really important work. I cannot thank you on behalf of the entire Pittsburgh tech community. And we're going to stay in touch with you because you just committed to something that we're going to follow up on. And
Hey.
so,
Hey, have coffee, we'll judge, as I say.
thank
have
you
panini
so
sandwiches, too.
much. Thank you so much for joining us. Chairman
Thanks so much,
Ajit
guys. Take
Pai,
care.
thank you. Until next time.
Talk to you soon.
Thanks. So now we are going to quickly switch and continue great conversation. I am very thrilled to introduce Jay Brown. He's president and CEO of Crown Castle. And I just want to say a couple of things before I pass the baton to Jay. Thank you for being here. We have, speaking of 5G, you're leading a company, Jay, that is at the forefront of deploying 5G infrastructure across the nation. So Crown Castle is actually a strong partner with us at the Tech Council in this 5G for PGH initiative, which we spoke a little bit about, and we'll talk more, as are the team members at AT&T and DQE, who are also with us, joining us on this call. So when people ask me, you know, what 5G is going to mean for the future, I can really only answer the question by saying supercharged innovation. You heard it from the chairman. I know that we're going to hear it from you as well. The speeds will be faster. The innovative minds who are going to be able to leverage this, we're going to hear of companies that 5 years from now will only have occurred as a result of this kind of innovation and invention. So to describe the technologies that they'll be deploying, I'd have to be a billionaire entrepreneur myself, which unfortunately I am not, but I'm certainly surrounded by people who are going to transform this. You know, we could not have accurately predicted the rise in creativity and entrepreneurship and job creation that was going to follow the transition from 3G to 4G. So if you were looking at your cell phones now, I wonder how many of your most essential apps, you know, we'd be able to use. I mean, how would it have been possible even on a 3G? So we're, you know, probably not many. And the sluggishness that we have tolerated right now will be so exciting in terms of what happens in the future. So as part of our 5G, 4G, you know, 4PGH initiative, we will be sponsoring, as Jonathan mentioned, a business plan competition to help spur that innovation and creativity right here in our own backyards in Pittsburgh. So without any delay, I want to welcome Jay Brown to the program. And I'm going to ask you to set the stage, provide an overview of Crown Castle and the company's connection to Pittsburgh and the nation. What does Crown Castle's national communications portfolio consist of? So tell us, and welcome and thank you for taking the time, because I know you're very busy.
Thanks for having me. It's a real pleasure to be with you. We've certainly appreciated the partnership we've had with the Pittsburgh Tech Council, and excited about the things that are to come. And I would just start where Chairman Pai finished in the end of his remarks. It's been incredible to watch as first responders have responded to the virus and serving all of us so well. Things that we take for granted in terms of doctors and nurses because we don't see them day in and day out, putting their lives on the line in order to save so many, makes me proud to be an American. Mm-hmm. And as I think about our own company and our employees providing this critical infrastructure, we have employees that are continuing, we have obviously office employees who are working from home, but we have well over 1,000 employees who are in the community working, making sure that infrastructure is up and running in places where there's critical need, that we're continuing to add additional infrastructure into the community so that all of the things that we're relying on in order to be connected at a time when we're not able to go to the office continue to work really well. So as a company, we're focused entirely in the US. We have over 40,000 towers in the US. We also have about 80,000 miles of dense urban and suburban fiber optic cable. The combination of those two assets is what enables everything to be connected. So I know we're going to get into this a little bit more about 5G, and you mentioned it in some of your opening remarks, but it's what enables that to work. So it's the invisible part when you pick up your device, whether it's a tablet or a phone, and you start to use it to communicate in some way. It leaves that device and it travels across our infrastructure, goes and gets either an answer or connects you to another person, and then enables that connection between the two. We're very similar in a lot of ways to an office building, if you will. So everyone comes and puts their technology onto our infrastructure, and we're providing the infrastructure in order to be a low-cost provider to all of the folks who are actually bringing the technology to bear.
So let's dive in a little bit. So what is being done locally and nationally to increase capacity on the networks during this time, like right now, of high demand? And yeah, go on.
Yeah, there's a combination of things that are being done. So part of it is that the network is designed to handle a significant amount of traffic. And as we design networks, if you think about normal traffic patterns in a day that would have been 4 months ago or 5 months ago, where traffic may have been relatively light in our neighborhoods during the day, and then early in the morning and then after dinner at night, we're on our wireless devices and we're starting to tax those networks. And the traffic was in a different location from, say, 7 in the morning till 6 or 6:30 in the evening. And now we're putting all of that traffic into concentrated areas that were previously just reserved for the evening hours. So the infrastructure is there, and we're putting greater burden on it. And most of our responses currently are trying to hit the areas where the carriers have seen big spikes in activity that the networks really just aren't designed to handle that much activity. So there are some hotspots where we're working with the carriers closely and trying to continue to get infrastructure deployed. There are also some areas that the carriers have needed to and have been working to get covered. And so our folks are continuing to work in normal course to cover areas that they already know they had challenges on, and we're on the drawing board and in the planning stages of construction even prior to COVID-19. And so we're working on a combination of both what's arising as a result of it, but then also some things that they knew were hotspots and working to resolve those now.
Well, when you think of the convergence in the home now, when you think that people are using telehealth and gaming and it's, school as well as work, the pressures on the system have probably never been as great as they've been over this last month.
That's exactly right. And one of the things that in your last question, you remarked around how the world will change as we move from 4G to 5G. Certainly, there's an aspect of 5G that will be, it's faster. And as we have gotten accustomed to talking about when we went from 3G to 4G, that was faster. And all of the conversation around 4G was faster. And we went from 2G to 3G, a lot of that was faster. 2.5 to 3G, it was faster. And that faster translated in a lot of ways into us just moving from having either just text messages and voice conversations to where the idea of these things being a phone, it's almost weird that we call them a phone because we push far more across them than we do really even our voice, although that's changed some in the most recent days. The big important move though, when we go from 4G to 5G, it will be faster. But from a carrier standpoint, it's going to be far more efficient. And that efficiency will be realized for us as consumers, and particularly many folks who are on this call as innovators, as you think about what's coming next in the world, as you referenced in your question, the number of devices that can be simultaneously connected, that's the real game changer in 5G. So if you took about 400 acres, roughly, we can connect today in today's wireless networks. We can connect about 1,000 people in that 400 acres. That number will be into the millions in terms of connected devices with 5G. So today, if you think about each one of those kind of 1,000 spots inside of the network, that's really valuable real estate. And the carriers need to charge a certain amount in order to get a return on that. As we move towards 5G though, if we can connect millions of devices in a relatively small area, each device, if you will, or each connected device, I should say, each connected device doesn't have to provide a $50 a month or a $60 a month charge in order to justify using up that valuable real estate like we have to do in 4G. In 5G, what we can do is connect millions of devices, and each device may only produce a few pennies a month of additional revenue. It could be anywhere from a few pennies to maybe a couple of dollars a month, but it doesn't have to bear its weight in terms of taking up valuable real estate. And that is where I think innovation is going to really be created. And we'll see it as consumers. You referenced some of the apps and other things that will likely connect to our devices that we'll use in different ways, whether those be healthcare monitoring kind of devices that will change the way we live. But it's also going to be things that are very simple, like clothing and shoes and other things that will connect. And then I think there's a whole industrial application that's going to be a real game changer as we go from 4G to 5G. Not only will we be able to connect a lot of things, you could argue we'll nearly be able to connect everything. And in industrial settings, the latency when that's going to come down in the network going from 4G to 5G will be a real game changer. So latency that's the component of the network where when we push the button on the device and want to gain additional data out of the network, how long does it take for that device to actually get a response? That's the latency, from the time I push go till the time I get something back. And that latency in 5G is going to go to basically 1 or 2 milliseconds. So imperceptible to the human eye. So things like virtual reality and augmented reality, which today have to be software that's stored actually on the devices because the network can't respond fast enough. Now, all of a sudden, the 5G networks will be fast enough that it will be simultaneous. So if you just took a simple example of like a construction project and you put a pair of goggles on a construction worker and the goggles have recognition software on them, they can recognize that the construction worker has selected the wrong size bolt before he's even put it into the structure. And then give feedback to that worker. No, you need the number 6 bolt, not the number 8 bolt. To put into that beam. Those kind of applications, again, very little revenue dollars per month, but the impact and the reduction of cost in settings like construction are going to be massive. And I think those kind of industrial applications are going to be really awesome to watch as we get into 5G.
Yeah, those are great examples. We have a couple of questions, Jonathan. You want to unlock a couple of questions or ask some?
I'm going to ask them because I like asking questions. So this is a really cool one. This is from Marvin Strubu. He says, what is Crown Castle doing to encourage good aesthetic design of 5G small cells?
Yeah, so we want to make sure the places where we live and work, as we've got employees spread out all over the country in all of these communities, we all want both, right? We want to be connected everywhere we go, and we don't want to disrupt the aesthetic of the community. And so we work really hard with local municipalities and utilities and neighborhood associations to understand what are the aesthetic needs inside of that community. And then our goal is to bring in a solution that can be shared across all of the providers in order to reduce the amount of clutter that ends up getting put into the environment. And then work with that local municipality to create an aesthetic that it's hidden. I'm really proud of what we've done in a number of different places. In fact, Chairman Pai was in Houston with me not too long ago, and we were in the downtown setting, and we were showing him how we had hidden small cells. And so whether it's cabling, connections, antennas, there are a lot of different solutions that we can use in both small cells and towers in order to effectively hide the infrastructure. So it's a combination of making sure we're meeting the need and the desire for connection, and at the same time coming up with as low an impact aesthetic as we possibly can. It's interesting to me, if you think about the other place where we really need connectivity all the time, it's electricity. And when electricity was rolled out, no one really thought about the aesthetic. And so about half of the electricity in the U.S. is delivered by overline cabling, and it doesn't look good. And
it's kind of rustic looking, you know?
Yeah, exactly. And so we have this opportunity as we're thinking about deploying 5G as we have done with 4G to really be thoughtful about in the local community. And obviously you can't get away from, you have to have some vertical infrastructure. So there's not some magic solution. We can't put it in a satellite. It doesn't have enough capacity or speed to put it there. We can't make it invisible, at least not yet. So there's got to be some vertical infrastructure. And so working with the local communities to make that infrastructure have as low an impact as possible is something we want to make sure we do.
Another question, Jonathan?
For sure. So do you see more cities monetizing the existing facilities like light poles as an example for the benefit of infrastructure?
Yeah, the FCC has done a great job at this. So under Chairman Pai's leadership and frankly, even past administrations have done this really well. They've recognized the necessity of getting this, the deployment of wireless spectrum into the market. And so they've been helpful at a federal level to set some parameters around how we can engage and deploy the technology. In some cases, local communities have looked at this as a way of solving a budget crisis. And so The FCC really had to step in and prevent local communities from raising the price to where it became uneconomical. As it sits today, there's federal legislation in place that provides a return for the owner of those poles and covers their cost for handling the process of application and other things in order to approve our ability to put this infrastructure on their poles. And what's great about that is that ultimately the cost, well, maybe at first touch, it looks like this is a cost to Crown Castle. Ultimately, it's really a cost directly to the consumer. The cost is that we share is shared across all of the wireless carriers. And to the extent that the infrastructure can be deployed at the most cost-effective way, which is why our business is a shared business model. We don't charge the same amount as we would if we only had one wireless operator to provide the infrastructure from. We get a return by providing it to all of them. So they all pay a much lower cost than if each one owned their own. And as we do that, what we're in essence doing is lowering the price to the consumer as networks become cheaper to deploy, and therefore they become more robust. So there were a lot of questions in the last session about, how do we ensure an equal provision of the infrastructure across the country? And ultimately, that frankly comes down to a cost question. So everything that we can do to reduce the cost is passed on to us as consumers, and we also get the benefit of a much stronger and more robust connection as a result of a lower cost provision.
So how are you, as an executive, a CEO for a major company that helps to keep us all connected, how do you take care of yourself during this time?
Well, we've had two objectives during the COVID crisis that I've talked to our employees about from kind of the first time it started to really impact our country. Our objective number one was to make sure we were caring for the safety and well-being of our employees. Well before everyone started to work remotely and work from home, we had gone ahead and transitioned our office workforce to working remotely in order to make sure that we were caring for them. Part of that rationale was to ensure that we weren't spreading the virus inside of our offices. That was effective and certainly heading that off. The other aspect that we've got, as I mentioned earlier in the conversation, well over 1,000 employees who are working in the community around the country. So we've done things like provide them with masks and goggles and gloves, and in some cases gowns, depending on where they're working. A big portion of our business is actually providing fiber services into hospital settings, particularly in the Northeast. And so as we've endeavored to keep those networks up and running, and in a lot of cases provide even additional bandwidth in a lot of those places, we've had to work really closely with hospitals to ensure our safety protocols were in place, allowing them safe access to those locations. And our customers, the hospitals, have been great at assisting us in making sure those protocols are in place. We've also had the opportunity around the country, as we've been caring for people, we have an initiative in terms of working in the community that we call Connected by Good. Historically, that's been to spend a significant amount of funds in improving park systems. We're all about connecting people, and parks are a place where people connect, not on their devices, but connect socially. And we took all of those funds for this year and we moved them into providing technology to schools. So around the country, what we've done is been putting technology in the hands of underprivileged kids, whether that's laptops or tablets in their hands so that they can go to school remotely, has been a big focus of our efforts over the last few weeks. And really proud to say in a number of markets has had a huge impact. We've done some of that even there in the Pittsburgh market with some of our IT folks, which has been great. Been a joy to be able to participate in that. And then the second component, after we care for the safety and well-being of our employees, is to making sure that we're delivering for our customers. And I'm just so proud of our team. We figured out a way to work remotely well. We transitioned quickly, and we've done a great job for customers thus far. And we'll continue to do that as we go through this. So it's always a learning experience when you're aiming for making sure that you deliver for customers. As customer environments change, their needs change, and their ask of us changes. And we've certainly been through this, but proud of our culture that has has been designed to be responsive to when a customer needs something, we respond to that. And so we've been trying to do that in really unique ways over the last several weeks.
So in looking ahead, right, if we can look ahead right now to potential infrastructure legislation at the federal level, would you expect communications infrastructure to be part of that? And what would that mean for Crown Castle and your plans?
So the chairman talked about a couple of things that are really important. As you think about, and just stepping out of maybe directly my own business, but just thinking broadly, there are two things that you have to have in order to have wireless connectivity in the world. Number one, you have to have funding. And number two, you have to have wireless spectrum. On the funding side, the big movements that have happened in the world in the last few months that are really encouraging towards this end is the combination of Sprint and T-Mobile means that there's now a third provider in the wireless industry in the US that is well capitalized, and the FCC and the DOJ did a terrific job of setting forth some parameters in terms of their build out for 5G. So they now have a mandate, if you will, that they've got to build out a significant amount of 5G network. And T-Mobile has talked extensively about what that's going to look like. That's going to be great for all of us around the country. And I believe that will be paired with a lot of investment from AT&T and Verizon as they build out their 5G networks. There's also a new entrant in the market in terms of Dish, who is getting some additional spectrum and some funding, and we'll be in the process of building out a 5G network. So we're going to end up with 4 operators in the US, all building 5G networks with significant amounts of capital. It's really important. The second thing that Chairman Pai mentioned, and he rattled off a number of spectrum bands that the FCC has worked on in order to get those deployed. I think about that as like water in the garden hose, if you will. So we keep exhausting all of the water that comes out of the garden hose because we all keep using so much of it for various things. And the reality is we can't put enough infrastructure into the market to cover everyone who wants to use that spectrum. We've got to have more water, if you will, added to the garden hose. And so they're adding significant amounts of flow of water to the garden hose by these additional spectrum bands. And those spectrum bands combined with capital mean that the wireless experience is going to be greatly enhanced over the coming years. I know there's a lot of questions about, how does the US stack up to the rest of the world? And I think as Americans, we should be really proud of not just the current administration's FCC efforts that they've done, but something that has happened over a couple of decades. When I look at where the US is positioned relative to Western Europe, for instance, we are in a great place because of the amount of spectrum that we've allocated to it, as well as creating avenues where both public and private funding of these networks can be done in a way that's going to benefit all of us over the long term. So I'm really excited about where we're positioned. And right here at the launch and the start of 5G, we're headed towards something that's going to be really awesome for us as consumers. But then also, as you think about those folks even on this call who are entrepreneurs, who are innovators, you're going to have a playground and a sandbox, if you will, that's going to just be awesome in terms of what you can create in terms of connected devices. And it's going to radically change the way we live and work for coming decades. So I'm really excited about the foundation that we're laying here for future entrepreneurs and innovators. Is going to be really fun to watch over the coming years.
Well, we have spent a half hour with you. It has been delightful. I thank you so much. Thank you everyone for having the opportunity to have the president and CEO Jay Brown of Crown Castle. My hat's off to you, as we are definitely on the eve of innovation once again. And to all your people who are actually out there day in and day out, making sure that we are accelerating, the agenda and eradicating the digital divide. So I thank you for that. Thank you for your time. I also want to thank Huntington Bank and AT&T. We're pretty excited. We have more people this week. Tomorrow we have the leaders of Highmark and AGH. That's our health system. So we'll probably be talking about telehealth. And then on Thursday, we will be hosting US Congressman Mike Doyle. So that's it for now. Thank you again, Jay. Thanks all of you for joining. And this is archived. And if there are any questions that have not been answered that we can share with Crown Castle to see if they can answer that, we will share that and put it on our site as well. So thanks everyone and enjoy the day.
Audrey, I think we need to have Jay be one of our guest judges as well to join Ajit. Just saying.
Oh,
That
yeah?
sounds fun. I'm in.
Good.
That sounds great.
How about that?
Come
I
on.
probably don't
man.
even have to check with my lawyers. I'm good. I think
You can come right on in.
all right.
Well, Permanente sandwiches and lots of coffee.
All right. Sounds
For many
great.
sandwiches. Okay.
Thanks
you
for all you're doing in the community. It's great. Huge help. Glad to be a part of it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.